The Young and the Restless spoilers, full December 18, 2025. The pressure cooker that has been building around Jack Abbott finally reaches a boiling point. And when it does, it is Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson who find themselves standing directly in the blast radius. Jack has tolerated a great deal over the years, betrayals disguised as misunderstandings, opportunism masked as necessity, and collateral damage justified as strategy. But whatever Adam and Chelsea have done this time pushes him past the threshold of patience. There is a particular look Jack gets when he is done negotiating with reality, a sharp, assessing gaze that strips away excuses before they can even be spoken. And when that look settles on someone, it is never about theatrics. It is about consequence. Jack does not raise his voice to command authority. He lets history do that for him. Decades of surviving Victor Newman have taught him that the most dangerous moments are not loud but precise, and when Jack decides someone must be held accountable, it is because he believes they have crossed a line that cannot be walked back. Adam and Chelsea are painfully aware that they have been operating on unstable ground for some time now. Their recent choices, whatever justifications they may cling to, have placed them in a morally ambiguous space where intent and outcome no longer align. They have been maneuvering carefully, or at least they believed they were, threading the needle between survival and ambition. But Jack understands something they underestimate. In a war of this scale, neutrality is an illusion. With the Abbott-Newman conflict reignited at full force, every action becomes a signal, every silence a potential betrayal. Jack cannot afford to assume innocence when the stakes involve Abbott's future, his family's legacy, and Victor Newman's increasingly unrestrained aggression. What troubles him most is not simply what Adam and Chelsea may have done, but the timing of it, because timing in this war is never accidental. The central question that haunts Jack as he weighs their involvement is not just whether Adam and Chelsea acted independently, but whether they were executing a directive from Victor himself. That distinction matters, but only to a point. If they acted on Victor's orders, then they are extensions of his will, instruments in a campaign designed to destabilize Jabot from multiple angles. If they acted on their own, believing they could play both sides without consequence, then they have proven themselves reckless at best and dangerous at worst. Either scenario is unacceptable. Jack has seen too many schemes dressed up as clever improvisation to give anyone the benefit of the doubt at this stage. The battlefield has shifted from boardrooms to people, and Jack knows that Victor's greatest strength has always been his ability to weaponize personal relationships. Jack's history with Victor Newman gives him a clarity few others possess. He has spent decades watching Victor test loyalties, reward duplicity, and discard allies the moment they outlive their usefulness. Jack recognizes the signs when someone is operating in service of Victor's interests, even when they claim plausible deniability. Adam, in particular, triggers every alarm Jack has learned to trust. Adam's reputation precedes him not because of rumor, but because of pattern. He has betrayed nearly everyone in Genoa City at one point or another, sometimes out of desperation, sometimes out of resentment, and sometimes simply because it suited him. Adam's intelligence makes him dangerous, but it is his flexibility with loyalty that makes him unpredictable. Jack has no illusions about Adam suddenly becoming a stabilizing force in the middle of a corporate war. If Adam has inserted himself into the Jabot crisis in any meaningful way, Jack assumes it was calculated, not accidental. Chelsea's involvement complicates the picture further, not because Jack doubts her intelligence, but because he understands how easily good intentions become tools in Victor's hands. Chelsea has always existed in the margins of power, close enough to influence events without fully controlling them, and that position makes her vulnerable to manipulation. Jack does not dismiss the possibility that Chelsea believed she was acting for the greater good, or even for self-preservation, but intent does not erase impact. If her actions helped undermine Jabot, interfered with Jack's countermeasures, or provided Victor with leverage at a critical moment, then the damage is real regardless of her motivation. Jack has reached the stage where he cannot afford to separate personal sympathy from strategic reality. What makes this confrontation inevitable is Jack's understanding that unchecked behavior now will metastasize later. He has learned this lesson the hard way, often too late, and he refuses to repeat it. Victor thrives on chaos, on the uncertainty created when people are allowed to blur boundaries without consequence. Jack's response is therefore not impulsive anger, but controlled reckoning. He intends to force Adam and Chelsea to account for every choice they made, every door they opened, and every advantage they handed Victor, whether knowingly or not. This is not about revenge. It is about containment. Jack knows that if he allows even small acts of interference to go unanswered, Victor will exploit that weakness relentlessly. The gravity of the moment lies in the fact that this reckoning does not exist in isolation. The Abbott-Newman war has reached a phase where personal miscalculations can trigger systemic collapse. One wrong move can spook investors, destabilize partnerships, and confirm the narrative Victor is trying to sell that Jabot is vulnerable, divided, and ripe for dismantling. Jack's fury, therefore, is not theatrical outrage, but defensive necessity. He cannot protect his family or his company if he allows Adam and Chelsea to operate without scrutiny, especially when their proximity to Victor places them squarely within the sphere of suspicion. Adam, of course, will not accept this quietly. He never does. His instinct is to frame himself as misunderstood, to argue that his actions were pragmatic rather than malicious, that he was navigating a complex situation with limited options. Chelsea, too, may attempt to explain, to contextualize, to soften the edges of what they have done. But Jack is not in the mood for narratives. He is interested in outcomes. Did their actions weaken Jabot? Did they interfere with his strategy? Did they give Victor an opening he would not otherwise have had? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, then explanations become irrelevant. This is where Jack's decades-long rivalry with Victor gives him an edge. He understands that Victor's most effective victories are not won through direct assault, but through erosion by convincing others to make small compromises that accumulate into catastrophic failure. Jack refuses to let Adam and Chelsea be part of that erosion, whether they intended to be or not. His cold resolve sends a clear message to everyone watching. The Abbott family will no longer absorb damage quietly while others play dangerous games on their perimeter. The impending confrontation carries an unmistakable warning for Genoa City at large. Jack Abbott is done assuming that shared history or complicated loyalties excuse harmful behavior. In this phase of the war, lines are being redrawn with ruthless clarity, and anyone who crosses them will be held accountable. Adam's reputation for betrayal and Chelsea's precarious positioning have placed them squarely in Jack's sights. And once Jack reaches this point, there is no soft landing. Whatever lesson he is about to deliver will not be symbolic. It will be instructive, public enough to deter repetition, and sharp enough to remind everyone that this conflict is no longer theoretical. As the storm gathers, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Victor Newman may be the architect of chaos, but Jack Abbott is no longer willing to let his enemies outsource destruction through intermediaries. Whether Adam and Chelsea acted as pawns or players, Jack is prepared to make an example of them, not out of spite, but out of necessity. In a war where loyalty is fluid and power is predatory, Jack's willingness to confront them head-on signals a dangerous escalation that suggests he is no longer simply reacting to Victor's moves, but beginning to impose consequences of his own. In what may be the most volatile pairing Genoa City has seen this week, Billy Abbott has quietly entered into an agreement with Phyllis Summers. And the implications alone are enough to make even seasoned power players uneasy. Billy and Phyllis are not natural allies, they are accelerants. Separately, each has a reputation for impulsiveness, emotional decision-making, and an uncanny ability to turn manageable problems into citywide catastrophes. Together, they form something far more dangerous, a feedback loop of resentment, ambition, and recklessness that feeds on chaos rather than control. This is not the kind of partnership built on trust or long-term strategy. It is the kind forged in shared anger, shared urgency, and the mutual belief that the current order of things deserves to be disrupted violently if necessary. Whatever deal Billy and Phyllis have struck, it is almost certainly not small, subtle, or sustainable. Phyllis has never understood the concept of half measures. She does not maneuver gently or retreat when resistance appears. When she commits to a plan, she commits fully emotionally and often destructively, convinced that intensity itself is a virtue. Billy, for his part, has a long and painful history of taking already unstable situations and pushing them just far enough to ensure maximum fallout. He does not merely react to chaos, he provokes it, sometimes out of conviction, sometimes out of self-sabotage, and often without fully considering who will be caught in the blast radius. The idea that these two are now coordinating rather than colliding is alarming, not because it guarantees success, but because it guarantees escalation. Their alliance has the unmistakable scent of something that will either look brilliant in retrospect or be remembered as the moment everything went off the rails in Genoa cities. History suggests it is very often both. The real mystery is not whether this alliance will implode, but what could possibly have driven Billy and Phyllis into the same corner in the first place. They have never been particularly close, and in recent months their social and emotional orbits have barely overlapped. If they are working together now, it is not out of nostalgia or friendship, but necessity. In Genoa City, necessity almost always means a shared enemy, and shared enemies tend to be powerful ones. That reality immediately narrows the field. Victor Newman looms as an obvious possibility, especially given the way his shadow currently stretches across every major crisis in town. Billy has his own long, complicated history with Victor, a mix of resentment, rivalry, and unresolved wounds tied to legacy and control. Phyllis, meanwhile, has never forgiven Victor for the many times he has treated her as expendable, inconvenient, or useful only when it suits him. A mutual desire to undermine Victor, directly or indirectly, would be more than enough to draw them into uneasy cooperation. Yet Victor may not be the only target, or even the primary one. Jack Abbott's name cannot be dismissed either, particularly given the turmoil surrounding Abbott Communications and the pressure Billy and Sally are under to contain the fallout from the recent disaster. Billy's relationship with his brother has always been fraught, shaped by admiration, rebellion, and the lingering sense that he is perpetually being measured and found wanting. If Billy believes Jack is tightening his grip, sidelining him, or making decisions that threaten Billy's autonomy, resentment could easily push him toward a riskier, more confrontational strategy. Phyllis, despite her complicated loyalty to Jack, has never hesitated to challenge him when she feels dismissed or underestimated. If Abbott Communications becomes a symbol of everything they believe is being mishandled, then their alliance begins to look less random and more inevitable. Phyllis's recent behavior adds another layer of intrigue. Her ongoing interactions with Kane Ashby, carefully defining boundaries while still insisting on proximity, suggest a woman who wants leverage without commitment, control without vulnerability. Kane represents both stability and utility, someone she can keep close as a potential ally or shield without fully revealing her intentions. This pattern mirrors Phyllis's broader approach to power. She positions herself near people who matter, not out of affection, but out of strategic instinct. Billy, meanwhile, is still scrambling alongside Sally to manage the repercussions of the early week catastrophe, fighting fires while pretending they were part of the plan all along. The stress of damage control has a way of stripping away patience and amplifying risk tolerance, especially for someone like Billy, who has always been more comfortable improvising than stabilizing. If Billy and Phyllis are now combining forces, it suggests they have reached the same conclusion independently, that playing defense is no longer enough. Whatever they are planning is likely designed not just to survive the current crisis, but to flip the board entirely, to force a shift in power dynamics that makes the status quo untenable. That kind of ambition does not stay contained. It leaks, it provokes responses, and it drags in people who never agreed to be part of the plan. Genoa City has seen alliances like this before, alliances born of shared frustration and mutual disdain for restraint, and they rarely end quietly. The danger of this partnership lies not only in its potential targets, but in its internal chemistry. Billy and Phyllis both believe they are the smartest person in the room, both bristle at being managed, and both have a tendency to mistake emotional certainty for strategic clarity. In the early stages, this can look like synergy, like two minds moving in the same direction with exhilarating speed. But when obstacles appear, and they always do, same traits that fuel momentum can turn into friction, ego clashes, and catastrophic miscalculations. If one of them decides the other is hesitating, or worse, compromising, the alliance could fracture from the inside, taking everything around it down in the process. And yet, that very unpredictability is what makes this pairing so compelling and so terrifying. Billy and Phyllis are not interested in incremental change. They are interested in impact. They want reactions, consequences, visible shifts that prove they still matter in a city increasingly dominated by legacy titans and corporate juggernauts. Whether their shared enemy turns out to be Victor, Jack, or the broader machine grinding through Abbott Communications, their involvement guarantees that the conflict will intensify rather than resolve. Secrets will surface, lines will be crossed, and people who thought they were merely observers will discover they are suddenly participants. As Genoa City braces itself, one thing is clear: this is not a quiet alliance, and it is not a careful one. Billy Abbott and Phyllis Summers joining forces is the kind of development that rewrites trajectories, not just for themselves, but for everyone connected to them. Whatever plan they are building in the shadows, it will not remain hidden for long. And when it finally breaks into the open, the shockwaves will be felt far beyond the original target. In a city already teetering under the weight of old grudges and new technology, this partnership may be the spark that turns simmering conflict into full-blown chaos. Meanwhile, over on The Young and the Restless, Kyle Abbott makes a move that may appear small on the surface but carries far-reaching implications beneath it. He reaches out to his ex-wife, Summer Newman, with a message sent on Thursday. In Genoa City, nothing involving Kyle and Summer is ever incidental, and this contact is no exception. Their history is long, complicated, and emotionally charged, shaped by cycles of love, betrayal, reconciliation, and separation that never truly sever the bond between them. The fact that they share a child ensures that no matter how many times they attempt to move on independently, their lives remain permanently intertwined. When Kyle chooses to initiate contact now, it signals that whatever he needs to say is not casual, not nostalgic, and certainly not optional. Something serious is unfolding, something that reaches beyond his own crisis and into territory that affects both of them. What makes this moment particularly striking is its timing. Earlier in the week, Kyle aligned himself with Claire in a calculated pushback against Audra, a move that already revealed his willingness to think several steps ahead while others were still reacting emotionally. Now, with this message to Summer, a clearer pattern emerges. Kyle is not merely responding to chaos as it hits him. He is positioning pieces on the board, anticipating outcomes, and quietly attempting to control damage before it spirals out of reach. While others in Genoa City are playing checkers, reacting to headlines, scandals, and confrontations as the ex-Fladek, Kyle appears to be playing chess, thinking in terms of leverage, alliances, and long-term consequences. The text to Summer is not an emotional reflex. It is a strategic decision, one that suggests Kyle believes Summer holds influence, insight, or access that could prove crucial in the escalating conflict surrounding Jabot, Abbott Communications, and Victor Newman's widening shadow. The unanswered question is how Summer will receive this outreach. Kyle cannot be unaware that Summer is dealing with her own personal challenges, pressures that already stretch her emotional bandwidth thin. An unexpected message from him, especially one that hints at urgency or crisis, may feel less like an invitation and more like an intrusion at precisely the wrong moment. Summer has spent a great deal of time trying to define herself outside the gravitational pull of Kyle Abbott, and every time he re-enters her orbit, it threatens to destabilize that fragile sense of independence. Depending on its content, Kyle's message could be perceived as a plea, a warning, or a reminder of responsibilities she may not be ready to shoulder again. What is clear is that this contact risks reopening wounds that neither of them has ever fully managed to close. Kyle and Summer's story in Genoa City has always been cyclical, almost mythic in its refusal to end cleanly. They have fallen apart and come back together so many times that the line between past and present feels permanently blurred. Even divorce failed to untangle them completely, because co-parenting Harrison means their decisions continue to intersect in ways neither can fully control. Every interaction carries emotional residue, layers of unresolved feeling that complicate even the most practical conversations. That history ensures that Kyle's message, regardless of its actual content, will not land neutrally. It will be filtered through memory, regret, and the lingering sense that their connection is never truly dormantly paused. The content of the message itself becomes almost secondary to its impact. Whether Kyle is reaching out about Harrison, about Marchetti, about Jabbett's instability, or about something else entirely, the act of reaching out guarantees drama. If the message concerns business, it pulls Summer back into a web she may have been trying to escape. If it concerns family, it forces her to confront the reality that Newman and Abbott conflicts still shape her life whether she engages or not. And if it touches on something more personal for concern or unresolved trust, it risks igniting emotions both of them have spent years trying to manage rather than resolve. What makes this development especially potent is how it intersects with the broader power struggle unfolding across Genoa City. Kyle's decision to involve Summer suggests he believes this crisis has reached a point where personal history is no longer a liability but a resource. Summer's position, her connections, and her understanding of both Abbott and Newman dynamics give her a unique vantage point, one Kyle may now feel compelled to use. Yet that calculation comes at a cost, because every time Kyle pulls Summer back into his strategic orbit, he blurs the boundary between necessity and dependency, between partnership and emotional entanglement. As this message hangs in the air, unanswered or unread, it represents more than a line of text. It symbolizes the persistence of unfinished business, the way old relationships refuse to stay buried when the stakes rise high enough. In a city already rattled by corporate warfare, shifting alliances, and moral reckonings, Kyle's outreach to Summer adds another volatile variable. Whether she responds with support, resistance, or silence, her reaction will shape the next phase of this conflict. One thing, however, is certain. In Genoa City, nothing involving Kyle and Summer ever fades quietly into the background. And this message is poised to pull both of them back into the center of a storm that is far from over.